Hello, folks. Welcome to Beyond the Scorecard podcast, a show where we discuss golf, business, life, current events, and our expertise in the field. I'm Joey Chris Haack, the digital media and social media manager of HJGT. Joining me as my co-host, we have our executive director and founder, Mario Conti.
You know, this is now our third show. Super excited about this one. Somebody that I've admired watching his success, and I know Joey, you'll get into the introduction here, but certainly excited about this show here.
Yeah, today we have Chris Haack, the men's golf head coach at the University of Georgia. And we are happy to have you here. And from what I understand, you started back in the 1990s and coached the Bulldogs to 2 national championships, which from what I understand is the only 2 in school history, which is quite an unbelievable achievement. Also 8 Southeastern Conference crowns, 67 team tournament titles. Throughout your coaching career, Chris, you have produced PGA stars like Bubba Watson, Brian Harman, Russell Henley, Keith Mitchell, Harris English, Sepp Straka, and Davis Thompson. We have royalty over here on the podcast, folks.
Oh, I'm glad to join you guys.
Chris, I'll kind of start off and jump right into this here. You've led, obviously, a very successful program, and certainly one that junior golfers that play on our tour here at the Hurricane Tour would certainly have aspirations to be a part of your team. So, why don't you kind of start off by telling us, you led Georgia to multiple national titles, as Joey said, and you developed so many top tier players, one of which almost won the FedEx Cup this weekend in Russell Henley. What core coaching philosophy has really stayed with you constant throughout your career?
Well, it's a great question. And just to give you a little bit of background of how I got into coaching is I spent 16 years helping getting the HJGT started. And so in my last 6 years there, we had created an event called the Cannon Cup, and it was the best players from the East against the best players from the West. And I captained the West team. And my first 4 years, I had a young Tiger Woods on my team. And so being a part of that is what really got me interested in coaching, because I enjoyed that so much that when Dick Copus, the old coach, retired, and I had some former players, call and say, hey, would you be interested in doing this? I might not have been that interested had I not had that experience. So I really loved that. But one of the things I learned, back when the HJJ was going, is we used to do a tournament in Thanksgiving, and it was where we had all the All-Americans, and we had our banquet and our play of the year and so forth. And in those days, if you were still 18 and age eligible, even though you were in college, we would let you come back and play. So inevitably, we would have, a handful of guys that would come back, and I'd say, hey, how do you like college? Is it great? Are you loving it? And I was always surprised to hear how many of them would say, well, it's not all it was cracked up to be, because the coach favors the seniors and I don't really have much of a chance to play. And, they kind of pick over me. And it was kind of one of those things where I kept thinking to myself, well, the beautiful thing about golf is that you tee it up and you shoot a score, and the score is all that matters. It's the easiest way to quantify. It's not like you're out there trying to figure out who your best quarterback is or your best running back. And those kind of guys, you can quantify it. So when I got to Georgia, one of the mainstays of things that I did, which is still to this day, is we actually teed up and play for our spots. And I don't care if you're a returning All-American. I don't care if you're a freshman. We teed up, and if we have a 4-round qualifier, at the end of those 4 rounds, the low 5 guys go. And in my 30 years of coaching, I've only had 5 guys who never missed a tournament based on the way we do things. I had Kevin Kisner, Brian Harman, Russell Henley, Trent Phillips, and this past year, Buck Brumlow are the only 5 guys who never missed an event. And so I've always been of the volition, you play for what you're trying to do, and that's been kind of the mainstay of our program for as long as I've been coaching. It's you better be ready to qualify and play your way in, because when you get to that next level, nobody's going to give you anything. You got to play your way in, and it's very evident now. When you're watching the PGA Tour playoffs, and here you have guys trying to get to the top 70, and then to the top 50, and then to the top 30, and now the Ryder Cup. I mean, you're always qualifying, you're always playing your way in, so you better get used to it. And that's been kind of the mainstay.
I love that philosophy, and I think that should give a lot of hope to juniors. It's that, hey, if your game, let's just say you get onto the Georgia team, and as a freshman, your game isn't where it should be. That you have a weekly shot to get better, and I think more teams should operate under that philosophy. That kind of leads me into my next question, Coach Haack, is that what kind of culture have you built within Georgia that has really kept it consistently among the nation's best golf programs, and year in and year out, kids, would, do anything to be a part of your team?
Well, again, I think we just kind of try to hold all of our guys to a very high standard. And, the first thing they're told when we're recruiting them is that you're not allowed to join a fraternity. I mean, golf is going to be your fraternity. That's your group. That's your team, and that's most important when you step on this campus. Outside of schoolwork, this is your team. This is your fraternity. So they've got to maintain their grades. They got to do things right. We have a list of just fundamental basic rules. You got to be on time. You got to tuck your shirt in. You can't do things that anybody outside of our team is going to be embarrassed to hear or see whenever you're a guest at somebody else's golf course. So we just keep very high standards, and they're not unreasonable. They're just, hey, you know what? I tell them right up front, you're an adult now, you're in college, and you're going to be treated like an adult. And if you don't, you are shown the door pretty quickly. And it didn't really matter how good you were. If you don't abide by our standards, you'll be gone.
Yeah, no, I love to hear that. And, I'm a big preacher over the last 18 years that I've ran the Hurricane Junior Golf Tour. When I talk to parents and players, I'm a big preacher on like what you do off the golf course, right? And like the skills that you have and the manners that you have. And I think parents, and players, a lot of them just really, really focus way too much on, obviously score, is important, right? But you have to have a lot of other skills to be a well-rounded individual to succeed at Georgia. Let's face it. You can come into Georgia and be, have a 68 average, but if you get yourself into trouble off the golf course, I mean, as you just said, you're probably not going to last long there. So what are some mistakes that you see during the recruitment process? Why you've maybe chosen not to pick some players? I think it's important for people to understand that.
Again, I think that's a great idea. And I can tell you this, there have been situations where I've seen actions out of a junior golfer um, that immediately just crossed him off the list. So, we go to golf tournaments to watch kids play and recruit them, but we're not just watching their skill set. You know, I can look at a kid's scores and know the golf course and know the competition to know if he's any good at golf. But what we really try to do is go and see, what he's like. Is he hanging around the other kids, and is he having fun with them, or is he caught up in his parents wanting him to practice and do all these things, and so you got a little bit maybe over parental influence, or let's just say the kid. I always like seeing a kid when he doesn't have his best stuff and see how he acts on a golf course. And if he comes off the golf course and his mom or dad, go, hey, Bobby, hey, you hung in there, we'll get him tomorrow, type of thing. And if he snaps at them and cusses at them, well, how's he going to treat me if he can't treat his parents any better than that? So I actually again look at those type of things. So one of my favorite things is when I go up to a driving range at a tournament and I see one of those big bends in a leg of a golf bag because the kid's been banging it with his club. I cross him off the list because again, I think part of being a great player is understanding how to control your emotions and how to control your actions, and that is very important to us in our program.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. This is definitely a passionate topic of mine. If I can go back and, talk to 18-year-old Mario and look at the actions that I took on the golf course, I would have certainly changed a lot of things. And now, I see it from the other side, and I just kind of shake my head at a lot of things that I see. And I want to bring up something that happened this weekend at the FedEx Cup. Now, I don't watch golf a whole lot on TV, but there was something that really stood out to me. Tommy Fleetwood, who actually won the event on Saturday, he hit the ball in the water on a hole, and he took a bogey or a double bogey. And when he was going down the fairway, he was high-fiving kids. And the announcers were like dumbfounded. They're like, I cannot believe a PGA Tour pro would do that under the scrutiny and the pressure that they're under after they just hit the ball in the water. And it really, when you sit back and you look at that, you're like, man, what kind of character does that take? I put myself in his shoes. If I'm competing for $10 million and I just hit the ball in the water, I don't know if I'm going up to four kids and handshaking them and high-fiving them with a smile on my face. And the announcer, I don't remember who it was, Dan Hicks on NBC, said, there's not any other pro that would do that. And that was really commendable. And that kind of goes in line with, how you react after you hit a bad shot, because that's what it's all about. I mean, you've got players that could shoot 68 all day. Well, what happens when they don't have their best stuff? And I don't think parents really get a chance to hear that from a lot of people in your position, which is very valuable.
Yeah, no, and I until you told that story, I didn't know that because I wasn't watching it on Saturday, so I didn't see it. But I love hearing that story because, again, I think players all have to kind of figure out how they get over the bad shot, right? I mean, the ones that can get over it the best are going to go on to do better things as a result of it, inevitably. Um, to hear Tommy Fleetwood do that, I think is very commendable because, as much scrutiny he's under because he hasn't been able to win and so forth, maybe just in talking with his sports psychologist or somebody has maybe said, hey, in the event something like this happens, go interact, get it off your mind, get it, do something that'll totally get that in the back seat of your car, and I think that's very good because the hardest part about playing golf is controlling those emotions. And we all have, guys at that level, all are ultra competitive. We all were very competitive at some point in time, but being competitive is one thing, but acting out on the golf course is another. And acting out is only going to be a deterrent to what that next shot may be. So very, very few players that I know of can act like that and really rebound from it. But I think they all have started to learn, how to move on from that kind of stuff and how to behave and just be a good person and enjoy the game you're playing. I mean, it is a game, and you're never going to be perfect. And if you can ever get to the point where you realize that, you're going to be ahead of other guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such an undervalued, I think, part of the game is, physical is, I believe, I played multiple sports in my life and I still do. I think golf is by far the most mentally challenging sport there is. And in my opinion, there's not a close second.
I always tell my guys that a bad attitude might cost you one, maybe even two shots if you got a bad attitude. A great attitude might save you one shot or two shots. And over the course of a tournament, one or two shots could be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. I look at, all the best players in the world. You look at Scotty Scheffler again, on Sunday, first tee shot of the round, the FedEx Cup, he hits it out of bounds. I mean, the number one player in the world. He then regroups right away, drives one right down the fairway, makes bogey. I mean, that's not an easy thing to do. And there's a lot to take away from that message. And, one of the, kind of leading into my next question here is there's a lot of kids that have the ability across the country, that physical ability to maybe play at Georgia, and maybe they're not able to get on your radar as easily as they would like. What are some tips that you have for kids and parents that are going through the recruitment process to get on people like yourself's radar that maybe, aren't in the top 3% or 1% in the country?
Yeah. Shoot low. You know what is really happening right now in college golf is really it's making it even harder because now here we've gone from what is already a fairly small roster of kids on every team. Most of us were at 10 or 11 or 12. Now the NCAA has changed that to 9. Now you're going to have hard limits of 9, and then extra hard in the SEC, it's 8. We're going to a hard count of 8 only. So whereas before with 4.5 scholarships, we would break up a lot of the scholarship and so forth, and you'd have inevitably maybe a couple of kids that would be a walk on who were good and they were in state and always wanted to be at a place like Georgia. Now it's very difficult to even take on those kids because you're so limited with a hard count of 8. So it's getting harder and harder. But I would say to any kid out there is that you can get better at golf from one year to the next more so than any other sport. And so even though you might be a high school sophomore wanting to play, but you're having a hard time, maybe breaking 80. Heck, by the next year, you could be averaging 74, 75. By the following year, you might be averaging even par. But you just got to keep at it. You keep at the game. You keep playing. And there are even kids that weren't highly recruited coming out of high school that went to smaller schools. And now with the transfer portal, those kids have an opportunity to go to smaller schools and actually play well and catch the attention of college coaches who are now looking at the transfer portal for players. And I've got 2 on my team. I've got a young man from VCU that transferred in last year. And again, he was a late bloomer coming out of high school and, got to college and had a great freshman year and really has come into his own. And then I had another kid who was from Colorado Christian Division II school, who is from South Korea, who was playing there and ended up being the Gary Player International Collegiate Player of the Year, and is transferred in. And both of these guys are terrific players who flew under the radar. And so we're now always constantly looking at some D3, some D2, even some NAIA schools of watching guys because we know that kids can get better from year to year. And some kids, and I'll give you another example. So when I was recruiting Sam and Sep Straka, Sam was really the highly ranked guy, and he was really the better player of the 2. And so he was really the kid that we most wanted. But then when we saw Sep play, it was kind of like, well, God, he's got a lot of potential. He's big and he kind of looks a little bit like Ernie Els and he's got that kind of a smooth swing where Sam had a fast twitch and bombed it. But over the course of 4 years, Sam, he's now selling real estate, and Sep is a world-class player going to play in the Ryder Cup because over the course of 4 years, he really just got better and better and better. And so you just never know in our game who's going to emerge and figure it out and which guys, plateau.
Yeah, I love that message. I do also hear a lot of parents feel like, there's 16-year-olds that haven't peaked or 17-year-olds that they're out of time and, it's too late. And, kind of what I took from that is from your message, it's never too late. And, with the transfer portal, that really changed, the ball game. I mean, you can now, there's a different pathway to Georgia. There's you could start out at a, smaller Division III school in the first couple of years and possibly get, up into the Georgia rank, later on in your career. So,
well, what I wanted to say real quick was, and it works the opposite way too, where we might see a kid that we think, God, this kid looks like he's going to potentially be a good player, but we can't take him because of our roster limit. I might call a couple of guys at smaller schools and say, hey, you ought to take a look at this kid. If he ends up being as good as I think he is, he might want to transfer back one day. So we try to help the smaller schools as well identify some of those potential good players.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of kids that maybe are riding the bench that, instead of just hanging up the cleats, they may have an opportunity to, transfer down and play more, versus at an elite program as Georgia.
Well, and again, I think that's a great point, and I think people underestimate that, and that is, it's not doing you a lot of good to go to a big school where you're never playing and you're at the back of that lineup. It's invaluable getting that experience by being maybe at a smaller school where you're playing every tournament, you're having a chance to actually be in those competitions, because competition was ultimately is going to make you better. And so I think sometimes kids just, naturally think, well, if I'm not going to a big school, well, let me tell you, this is the day and age where don't worry about the big school, because let me tell you, that PGA Tour is littered with guys from small schools. And I mean, you can go through there, and for every guy from Georgia, there's a Zach Johnson who played at Drake, or a Chris Goddard who went to Rutgers, or Colin Montgomery who played at Houston Baptist. There are a lot of guys who became world class players from small schools.
Yeah, I'm glad you went in depth on that. It's coming from somebody of your stature. It's great to hear. When I started the Hurricane Tour 18 years ago, that was like my elevator pitch. Was like, there's so many opportunities. If you're not a D1 high D level player like at Florida or Georgia or South Carolina, you could still run the ranks through your 4 years at college, improve your skills, and you could still get a pathway to the PGA Tour. I mean, everyone's got to kind of have to do the same pathway. I understand, the game has changed a little bit with PGA Tour University and some exemptions, but at the end of the day, you got to go to Q school, whether you're at the University of Georgia or if you're at, Georgia Southern. Why go and ride the bench, hang up your cleats where you can go somewhere and play and get competitive reps?
I agree. Totally agree.
We'll leave you with one question, Coach. We've got a lot of Georgia fans that listen to the podcast and are members of the tour. You had mentioned that you're off to your first event tomorrow, I believe. So just kind of give us a preview of what the season looks like for you and how you guys are looking.
Well, we're actually taking off to go out to Pebble Beach. Our first
I'm
event
sorry
of
to
the
hear
year
that.
is yeah, it's a great event. We used to go to that event. 11 years ago it got started, and then there were only 8 teams out there. It's us, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State, TCU, and Texas Tech. And it's been those same 8 teams that have gone out there and played in this event. And then the guy who puts it on, his son became the women's coach at Mississippi State. So for the last 4 years, he's had the women's teams out there. And so this year he decided he's going to have all 8 men's teams and all 8 women's teams. It's going to be one last hurrah out there. And so the women will play Pebble Beach, their tournament out at Pebble, and the guys are going to play Spyglass. So we all stay at the lodge. The weather's perfect, so it's a great event. I'm excited to get out there with my guys. My team is led by a kid named Carter Laughlin, who is from Atlanta. He's our team captain. Um, he's had a good summer. And then also on my team is a kid named Grayson Wood. Again, really good player who transferred in from VCU 2 years ago. And then Shung Yang Cho from Colorado Christian who transferred in. But then I got a kid named Matt Maloney from Daniel Island. I've got a kid named James Earl from Miami. And I've got a kid named JD Culbreth from Thomasville, Georgia, who will round out my 6. So this is a unique event where we play 6 and count 5, where we normally play 5 and count 4. But then the rest of our schedule is really good. After that, we'll go to Colonial in Fort Worth and play there where the tour plays. From there, we go up to Long Island and play Maidstone out there. We're going to try to play Shinnecock while we're out there. And then we'll go down to Biloxi and play Fallen Oaks, which again is another great event that hosts a senior tour event. And then we finish the fall out in Maui at Canapali. So we got a great fall lineup, and our kids are really excited about it.
That's quite the schedule. If you guys ever need a water boy or somebody to watch the clubs, I would certainly. I'm your guy, man. I'm your guy.
Hey, all the old players from before I got here will always text me and go, I remember us going to Orangeburg, South Carolina, and Montgomery and Furman. And I said, I never saw a schedule like that. And I said, well, if I'm going to travel with the team, I might as well go to some fun places. And so for 30 years, I've had the privilege to be able to go to some great places.
That is incredible, and that certainly should be very motivating for some of the kids to hear. Where you guys are playing now, and what they can and what they could do at the next level. So, really appreciate your time here today, Coach. Nothing but the best of luck for the rest of the season, and go Dogs.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I will say this: I truly appreciate what you guys do with the Hurricane Tour and giving these kids chances and opportunities. I know that there are players on my team that have played at some of your events when they were younger, and I think anytime these kids have an opportunity to play in competition, check their skills against each other, and kind of learn what they've got to work on and what they got to do to get better is only helping them down the road. And I commend you guys for what you're doing, because we can never have enough events for all the kids that want to play our great game.
Well, we appreciate the kind words, and UGA is a staple on our schedule every year in the summertime. We were just there a few weeks ago. Great staff, great facility, great golf course. I love coming to Athens, Georgia. I was at the event this year. Great town, and again, thank you, Coach, and best of luck for the rest of the season.
Well, I will say, I knew you guys were there. I was out of town, but I came back and walked over because I wanted to see who won and what they shot and so forth. So we pay attention. Trust me, we do pay attention.
That's fantastic, Chris. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we greatly appreciate you listening into this episode of Beyond the Scorecard with Mario and Joey and our very special guest, Chris Haack. Please follow us on all social medias. You can find us at Hurricane Junior Golf Tour on all the major platforms, fairways, greens, and everything in between. We'll see you next time on Beyond the Scorecard.